Hello, my fellow witches, sorcerers, and other magical practitioners. My name is Aiden, and welcome back to Sky Snake Sorcery, Episode 5, Necromancy Protocols. So it has been a moment since I have been back on here, and I want to just give a quick little life update. I moved across the country since my last episode. I meant to record this before I went. I was going to have it edited. I was going to do all this stuff, but that did not happen. So we're doing it now. Kind of want to apologize for being so far away, for not keeping up with this. It's been a lot. I have started settling back in. It's been a weird time, to say the least. But what matters is that we are so back now. And I want to get right back into it with a pretty decent follow-up to the previous episode, which, by the way, you should totally check that out, which is Arte Protocols, with this episode being Necromancy Protocols. So we're kind of going to go through a couple different episodes here and there that discuss different approaches to various types of practices, various types of operations and styles of work, and it's how to start doing things, as it were. So necromancy is kind of a big word, and it's got a lot of cultural baggage now, to say the least. So what does necromancy actually mean? It means death, divination, necro, death, mancy, divination, or mantea. I mean, it all has to do with divination via the dead, via dead people. That's sort of what the word itself means. Now, for the actual practice, it's talking to dead people, engaging in their realm, petitioning the dead, moving the dead, having the dead do operations, as well as engaging with the things that are around the dead. So underworld deities, daimones, spirits of death, spirits who are death, things that are dead that are not people. You got your animals, your plants, you got spirits, you got all kinds of very interesting and strange things that exist in this really subterranean and strange world. This episode will cover how to actually approach the dead safely, how to do necromancy, further forays into it, and sort of explaining what this magic is, why we even do it, why you should do it, or it might also point to why you might not want to do certain things, or why you might not want to do this style of practice. But before we get right into that, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. So my books are open once more and again. I provide divination services primarily through Lenormand, but I also do tarot, geomancy, and scrying. Spellwork services are also open. Feel free to reach out to me at aidenthevivitch.com. That is AIDENTHEVVITCH.com. You can also find me over at Instagram at aidenthevivitch, Aiden the Witch, and you can also email me at aidenthevivitch1, the numeral 1 at gmail.com if you have any more specific questions and things like that. I also want to let you all know that there are products coming very soon to the store, so keep your eye on my Instagram and keep an eye on the store. I have a couple things already made. I'm just waiting to put them into proper containers before sending them out. And please feel free to give a like, rating, share, whatever it may be on this episode. It really helps me. Feel free to share around and let other people know about the podcast. So with that being said, let's actually talk about necromancy. I want to kind of start out by talking about what could be described as the levels of dead people. More specifically, not a pure hierarchy, but the different classifications, different kinds of spirits you'll be interacting with. So first and foremost is the dead, and you'll never get this, but the dead are people who have died. They're everywhere. They're both in the earth, in the sea, in the sky in some cases, on the side of the roads, in our forests, in our woods, in our own homes. They're everywhere. The dead are in every facet of our life because everyone and everything dies. Memento mori. Because of this, the dead are able to do things that a lot of their spirits aren't able to, just based on their proximity to the earth. They are very close to it, being quite literally in the earthly plane, on this physical level, that they can just go out and do things, which makes it very helpful for magic. But, there's a lot of dead people. All kinds of dead people all around the world. And we'll get a little bit into the more specific types of dead, if you can call them that, though I'll probably reserve some more specifics for later episodes. So we're going to also talk about the mighty dead, heroes, and saints. This is a category of elevated dead who have stories, mythos, legends, folk tales, aspects that relate to various different parts of the culture they are from, as well as various permutations in different cultures. I classify all these spirits together, even though they do have some pretty significant differences. It is important to recognize that they are a type of elevated dead. For example, we have the various hero cults of ancient Greece. We have Perseus as a very easy hero to point out to, but then we also have the saint cults of Christianity and Catholicism, where we see various saints venerated and engaged with all over the world. Your Saint Martha's, your Saint Rita's, your San Antonio's, your San Pedro's, all these spirits can be classified under the sort of mighty dead, spirits who are elevated and empowered, especially having further myth making about them and having a larger tale to them. They can be emanating from the land itself. You might have spirits very local to you, like in some cases in America, you could honestly look at George Washington as a mighty dead, Abraham Lincoln, your presidents, your founding fathers. We also see this in more specific subgroups around the states. For example, we have spirits like Martin Luther King Jr., we have spirits like Rosa Parks, we have spirits like Harriet Tubman, we have other historical figures who are very important to different groups and cultures within America who have various empowerments. High John the Conqueror is a really great example of this, so much so that he has permeated into a lot of other spaces in a culture. We have other spirits who might not be elevated in the traditional sense, they might not be very holy or venerable, but we have various spirits who are very popular and who have specific patronages in the more negative aspects. We have like Salome, we have Ivan the Terrible, we have Bathory. We have all these spirits who patron more the vampiric side of magic. We have, of course, witches, the Witch of Endor. We have Oryctho. We even have more modern people like Aleister Crowley, Dion Fortune, Austin Osman Spare. All these are mighty dead in some capacity, or heroes or saints, or any other sort of elevated person who at least has some bit of myth-making about them. Crowley has quite a bit, for example, but also has a very elevated place, a very important power, and a specific patronage. Even if that patronage isn't necessarily written down, we can look to their lives, we can look to them, and they are very much elevated by cultural status, by their empowerments, by the way that they move, and that their name in and of itself holds a certain power and capacity. When you mention these names, they all have a certain power, feeling, connotation, and understanding that comes with them, and they are associated with all these different things. I do want to talk more about historical dead. At some point, I'll probably do a more in-depth podcast, but for now, let's move on to ancestors. Ancestors are probably the most important dead to engage with. One, because you have access to them 1000% of the time. You never have to really do much of anything to get in contact with your ancestors. I mean, you can do more, but truly, you don't need any tools. If anything, glass of water, white candle. All you need. That's all you'll ever really need. Your ancestors run in your blood. Your ancestors are a part of your bones. They're in your hair. They're in your eyes. They make up every part of you. Your blood ancestors are always going to be accessible to you no matter what. And everyone has different types of ancestors that come forward. Shameless plug, if you get the spiritual framework reading with me, I will tell you about what ancestors you are closest to. It's pretty cool. But shameless plugging aside, your ancestors are very much present with you, and all you need to do is focus in on them. And you can also figure out quite a few things by just engaging with them. There's different courts of ancestors. There's the collectivized ancestors, as in spirits who have ancestralized, spirits who have been able to cross over, who have reached a certain point of elevation where they're no longer stuck in this world where they need to do all these different things and cause problems and get stuck and affect us. Ancestral healing is very important in that regard. Ancestral healing takes on a couple different forms. It takes on the form of very practical, very mundane things of unlearning trauma, habits, unlearning different things that are part of us. A lot of people have things like ancestral money curses is what we might call it. They struggle with certain ideas about money because of what's been put in their parents' head and in their parents' head and so on and so forth. The cycle of poverty, all these different things. Very important things to break down when you're breaking down things like capitalism and the way that people are exploited, but that's also helpful for ancestral healing too. But then there's also the very magical side of it, where you would go to your ancestors, where you would look for them, you would find them, you'd offer them healing, you would offer them light. There's different ways to go about this in different traditions. If you come from a very spiritist background, there's various prayers that you would say for them. You would offer them light, you would offer them progression, you would offer them means of elevating out of their current status, their very stuck nature. But there's also other ways to go about that as well. There's different things for different practices, and it'll kind of depend on what you're doing. If you're approaching it in a much more, witchcraft way, you might be doing it a bit different than that. But as someone who practices the spiritismo, I'm going to approach it from that perspective. But there are also other types of ancestors around you, and you gain ancestors when you do different things. Whenever you move to a new location, you inherently are engaging with the ancestors of that land, and you can in turn bring those ancestors into your life, into your practice, into your way of being, so that you can then engage with those spirits, both of the land and the ancestors of those spirits of the land, as well as the ancestors that tread upon this place before you. Those are very important ancestors, in my opinion, to engage with, especially because the land is going to be very tied into everything that you do. No matter what you're doing, you're going out somewhere, you're living somewhere, as long as you are on the land, then the land matters. We also find ancestors of craft. This is both witchcraft, practice, magical, esoteric stuff, but even like your other crafts. If you do wood carving, there are ancestors of wood carving, both in your own direct lineage, but also within the greater lineage. If you're an author, then there's so many ancestors of craft there that are that you're able to engage with. There's people who have Shakespeare altars, there's people who keep around images of famous authors like Oscar Wilde, Scott Fitzgerald, all these authors around you. You can call upon them in very subtle ways too. You don't have to be like, I call upon you, Shakespeare, to rise out of the Tartarian depth. No, don't do that. Just call out to them. They're very easy to access. They're really easy to call out to. Offer them a candle and a glass of water and their favorite drink, Bring them in, start working with them. Dr. Al Cummins works pretty closely with Arthur Gauntlet, who wrote the titular grimoire of Arthur Gauntlet. That's an example of an ancestor of craft. You can also look at other things, even just down to the very little things, when you're making various tools for grimoire operations, look at the ancestors of the grimoires, but also look at the ancestors who patron those individual things. You're making your black hilted knife, look to an ancestor of blacksmithing, find a blacksmith, speak to them and understand that process, because understanding that process will help you connect more with the work you're doing, even if you yourself are not doing that work, because there's so much that goes into all of these crafts that I don't think get appreciated enough. But your ancestors are always your first line of defense. They are always going to be there for you, whatever ancestor they may be, but they also can cause the most amount of trouble because they are so close to you. So if an ancestor is blocking something, you have to remediate that and open things up. And sometimes ancestral blockages are a very big thing. They're a thing that cause a lot of trouble for people. I had some issues with that here and there in my life. So, it's an important thing to work on, to give them light, to give them progression, to allow them to move beyond where they are now. I highly recommend reaching out to your ancestors first and foremost before any other spirit, because you can develop mediumship with them, you can develop spirit senses with them, you will learn to work in their ways, different spirits will reveal themselves to you. I have this nasty habit of just kind of scrying people a little bit, without a formal reading. I'll be like, oh, this ancestor likes you should talk to her more, thank you. And they'll be like, how'd you know about XYZ? And I'll be like, I don't know, development. But there are spirits who really want to be around you in your ancestry, and they are right there and ready to work. So they're great to go to as a first spirit, especially even in a necromantic context. Next up, we have spirits of death. This is a bit of a weird category, but these are spirits who are tied into death, the dead, the underworld, and other such rulerships, but are not death itself. But they're usually tied back in, usually being spirits who are subservient to death, spirits who enact operations of death, usually daimones that surround spirits of death. In some ways, you can see things like Azazel like this, where it's a spirit who might enact death but is not death itself. It's a weird category, and they usually come up on a case-by-case situation. They're not always going to be spirits that you immediately are reaching out to or who will be immediately obvious to you, but spirits of death are an important category, in my opinion, to talk about when discussing necromancy. And of course, that naturally leads right into the number one, death. Death itself. There's a million spirits who are death, as it were, out there from all around the world. Of course, Santísima Muerte is like the most popular right now for reasons. There's of course San La Muerte, there's Thanatos. There's all kinds of spirits you can find in pretty much every culture that are death. Even if it is just, like your Grim Reaper, a spirit who is death itself. You can also just operate and engage with death under that name. You don't necessarily need to have an over-cultural specific figure, but you can use those cultural images and archetypes to engage with and operate with death. I won't really get into the protocols for that here, as I only have one death, and that's Santa Muerte, and I'm not going to talk about her here. If you do want to know more specifics, you can look into your specific cultures. Feel free to reach out to me, and if I know something, I can send stuff to you. If you are interested in Santa Muerte, if you want to know more about her, reach out to me. We can talk more specifics and resources and things like that there. But death, I think, is very important, as well as other related spirits. Like spirits of the underworld, you get into things like Hades, you get into primordial ones, Nyx, Tartaros, Hecate. But death is a core component because death comes for us all. Death is what makes things dead and necromanceable. So death understands necromancy in that particular way. And on the topic of the underworld, let's talk about lands of the dead and how we approach them, how we get into them, how we engage with them, how we traffic with these spaces to get our stuff going. So there's the physical lands of the dead, the most obvious being the cemetery, but it is very potent, very direct. It is a place that is death itself, honestly. Land of dead, the holy field in some cases. The cemetery has a lot more protocols because of its proximity to death. It is where death manifests most easily. It is also where spirits of the dead tend to hang out. You'll end up probably courting a lot of them here. And it's also, where dead bodies are. So, lots of protocols come with that. First and foremost, you give something to the gatekeeper on the way in and on the way out. I grew up a lot with pennies. I use dimes as well. Take a dime and set it in the front of the cemetery. Say, this is for you, gatekeeper of this cemetery. Allow me safe passage. Let nothing harm me as I go in, and let nothing harm me as I go out. Very straightforward, very simple, very cute. And then on the way back out, take a dime and toss it over your left shoulder, saying, I give this to the spirits who are the gatekeepers of the cemetery. Let nothing follow me home. And then don't look back when you walk home. I am so strict about this rule. Some people are a bit more relaxed about it than I am, but don't look back when you leave a cemetery, especially if you do workings in there. If you're just passing through, it's good to give something. I find if I don't give something, then I get headaches and spirits will talk to me. So I give a little offering every time. But if you're just passing through, look back is not the hugest deal. But if you do a working, you should definitely not look back. There's various reasonings for this. First and foremost, these spirits need to be left to do their work. There is something to not looking at the thing and not obsessing over the thing. There is also something to letting the spirits operate properly and to not draw their attention back to you. Having that separation. It's also a good idea if you're doing a lot of heavy working here in the cemetery to wash yourself down afterwards. A really simple cooling bath is fine. You can make it with rosemary and rue. Rosemary and rue bath is going to be perfect all the time. Just keep some rue and rosemary for 3 hours. If you plan on going out to a cemetery, you can start the bath beforehand and then return home and just wash yourself off. You can just do some Florida water on your hands, back of your neck, soles of your feet. Always clean your feet. You can make more specific tools. I've seen people use like a chicken foot on the outside of their door. They'll take that off and rake themselves down with it and then put it back on the door, refreshing it every so often. It's just good to have for cleansing in general. If you have specific protocols, follow those protocols, you know? This is more of like if you don't have anything set up, here's like stuff to do. Now for actually like working the cemetery, you can leave stuff in there that will go down to the underworld, stuff that will go to the dead. You can obviously like talk to dead people there, very specific dead people. This is really helpful if you want to work with like those more quote-unquote celebrity dead. Like if you're looking to work with, I don't know, John Lennon, find his grave and work him there. If you're trying to work with Marie Laveau, go work with her at her grave. If you're trying to work with any sort of person who is local to you, then go to their grave and work there, give them water, give them a candle, speak to them, get to know them, various stuff in their grave. If you want them to deploy the work, give them tools to work with, arm them, give them stuff to use. You can also find all kinds of spirits here. Spirits in general will aggregate to cemeteries, especially those more chthonic, underworldly spirits. Again, that's a very specific thing. If you want to like talk more in detail about that and how it relates to your practice, again, reach out to me, book a reading, and we can read on your cemetery specifically with geomancy. The next place is the Crossroads, which is a very classic place for the dead to gather, as well as a bridge between the worlds. It's very easy to meet the dead here. They tend to be able to move along the crossroads. You'll also find wandering dead here in general. Spirits who may not have been given the proper burial. If there's like a grave at the crossroads, then you'll find those spirits there. Spirits who died at crossroads, people who crashed their cars, murders, things like that. Not super great and uplifting and positive dead all the time, but it is very, very classic for spirits to gather here. For the dead and for spirits of the dead, spirits who are death, the devil who patrons death in some capacities as a tutelary spirit, other spirits like Hecate who brings ghosts with her will meet here. It's very easy to access. There's a lot fewer protocols, but it can still be very dangerous, so be careful what you're doing. A crossroads is anywhere where two roads meet. Everyone has a crossroads somewhere at some point. Very easy to find them. Wherever your neighborhood leaves and meets with another road, that's a crossroads. The last place I was living was surrounded by crossroads. Everywhere there was like a crossroads, so they're everywhere. Crossroads have all kinds of spirits, so it's not just the dead, but it's a very easy place to traffic with them. And if you need to send them out in a particular way, you can get like a pouch or a packet of their dirt, do the operation, and leave it at the crossroads so that they go towards where they need to be. Preferably leave it in the direction you need them to go, or you can leave it at the crossroads nearest the target's place, or just bury it on the property, but that also has other reasons why you may or may not want to do that. Next up is railroads. Railroads are where spirits travel and the dead will go along them. Obviously, region specifics will be at play. There's different taboos and different natures to each railroad. Railroads are where the dead gather. You will find them there. Both very classic railroads, but metro stations, high-speed rails. Spirits will gather here. The dead will gather here. Spirits who just tend to commute will go there. People who died who were businessmen will show up. People who were frequent travelers will show up there. People who died on trains. People who are trying to get somewhere will show up there as well. The dead will move along the railroad. People who died building the train obviously will be there as well. Conductors, railroad engineers, all these spirits of the dead will gather on railroads. But it's also very good because it moves spirits along. You can call the dead there and have them send out their work all along the railroad. The sea is also a wonderful place to meet with the dead, especially again like mariners, sailors, people who died at sea in general. Is an access point between worlds. It also has so many mysteries hidden within it. The sea is very important to me for many, many reasons across many traditions. It does have very specific regional connotations in different places, and also, not everyone has access to the ocean. Other bodies of water can also act in a similar way, but that will also depend, more on where you are. They tend to be a bit strange, the dead that come from the sea, so do with that what you will. Sea spirits in general are going to carry some very interesting mysteries. They're very good at finding things that are hidden The dead here also tend to be very good navigators. They can tell you where things are. They can also help you orient yourself. They are a bit strange though. The sea changes the dead. I'll leave that ambiguous and mysterious. And lastly, abandoned locations and sites of death. I have put these together because they are not the same, but also can be related. Places that are abandoned attract stuff to it. When there's nothing there, something wants to go there. And sites of death, or terrible accidents, mass murders, things like that, the dead from those will be there as well, but other dead will aggregate there due to the trauma of that location. It just naturally attracts them in. There's a weird proclivity for that. You have to be very careful about approaching these places. You have to really do divination beforehand, especially murder sites. You don't know what's there. And the dead are not always going to be the things that are just around there. And sometimes other stuff evolves from that. So be careful, do divination beforehand, and be careful what you call into there as well. Next up is going to be the esoteric realms of the dead. Most simply, the underworld is going to be a very easy place to meet them. When I'm talking about these places, it's going to be a lot more vision questy, I guess. So the underworld is a very important place to meet with the dead. Kind of obvious. But it's also a great place to do operations, to do work. Learning to go there in vision or to go there in spirit flight is going to be very helpful. You can do all kinds of things in there. Catabistic rites can be done to travel into the underworld through vision, trance. Some herbs can help you get there, like datura. I will not be telling you how to do that. Don't do that if you don't know how to do that. Getting there, you can talk with spirits of the dead, spirits who are death, rulers of the underworld. You should probably have something that lets you get there. I don't recommend just like jumping into vision and trying to fly down to the underworld. If you work the Hecateon, there's a really good method for this. It allows you to meet with a spirit there. It also gives you a way to just get into the underworld, which you can adapt for all kinds of other things. It gives you spirit guides, it gives you protection formulae, and it lets you get there safely. I recommend, if you're doing anything like this, to have a good relationship with Hecate, with Persephone, with Hades, or whoever your culture-specific underworld spirit is. You want to go to an underworld that you are familiar with. Don't try traveling to just random ones. Don't try to jump into Mictlan if you aren't familiar with it, if you don't understand those spirits or protocols, there's many layers of Mictlan. If you don't really have a good grasp on the cultural context of it, generally most people know what Hades is like, so it's probably best to look into something like that. This can also probably be existential for some people. I don't really have that problem, but if that is a problem for you, don't do this. It is something that will mess with your mind. All sort of vision quest type stuff will, but especially this, because you are going to a very heavy miasmic place. Always cleanse before and after. You want to be well fasted as well for something like this. This is a larger undertaking, but allows you to meet with your underworldly patrons easier and can also bring forward certain dead a lot faster because you are in their world. Next up on the vision quest is the crossroads, but more specifically a visionary crossroads. This is especially if you work with any crossroads spirits like Hermes or Hecate. I do this with Hecate. Again, read the Hecateon, you'll get a very good idea of how to do something like this. But take a visionary journey down to the crossroads, and you can go to really any spirit from there, but you can also call the dead forward. You can ask to meet a dead person in this way. This is good if you're trying to further a relationship with a dead person who you don't necessarily have the strongest physical ties to. Again, if you're in Arizona and want to work with George Washington, you can't get to Mount Vernon easily. I don't know. You can just go to him in vision in that way, I guess. I don't know. Random example. But the crossroads is a good place to meet spirits, to call them forward, and also gets you a bit more stability and safety rather than going straight into the underworld. It calls them up, allows you to meet them there in a sort of medium playing field without having to worry about, okay, I have to cleanse myself off, I have to do all this stuff. I have to make sure that I'm not gonna get, murked by a hellhound or something. I don't know. You want to make sure that you understand how to properly go somewhere before you go there. So this is a nice meeting place. Next and last on this list is residencies of the dead, which is very, very specific. There's different historically attested ones, mythic ones that spirits have. Spirits also have their own meeting places. This can be a home, it can be a castle, it can be a forest, it can be a field, it can be a ship, it can be all kinds of things. You need to know the spirit first. You can't just show up uninvited to someone's house, quite literally. Once you get to know a spirit, you can ask them for a meeting place. I recommend this for saints, for ancestors. This is really good. If it's an ancestor, just meet in your ancestral home. If you don't have an ancestral home, make one, What is a safe place for you? What do your spirits show you in dreams? What do your spirits show you whenever you speak to them? What sort of impressions you get? Saints will also have these, I've found, certain ones at least. It usually is like a church or a monastery, or it can sometimes be a home that is very saintly. I don't know how to describe it, but you'll find that spirits have particular aesthetics that they like, and when you approach them in this way, it's much more familial, it's much more comfortable, but you're also more fully in their presence. I wouldn't do this with just random dead. Personally, I would do this more with those mighty dead, historic dead, saints, and ancestors. Now we have the actual techniques of necromancy and what all goes into it fully. First and foremost, conjuration, calling the spirit forward and engaging with it. There's a million ways to do a conjuration of the dead, quite literally a million ways. It will depend on the actual cultural context you're in, but you can also do this through necromantic patrons. There's saints of necromancy, there's demons of necromancy, there's other spirits who patronate gods and things like that. Check out my grimoire episode for more specific methods on conjuration, but quite simply, you can call them forward. It's good to do this with more unfamiliar dead rather than elevated dead or ancestors, but you can conjure them forward in smoke. A really simple operation I guess you could do is drawing a circle in the earth with your blessed knife, digging a small pit, filling that with charcoal, and then pouring nephalia, which is water mixed with honey, around that, and calling out to the spirit of the dead by calling upon your necromantic patrons like Hecate and calling her to bring forward that spirit. It's helpful if you also have some part of them, like a bone or graveyard dirt, things like that. There's more specifics that you can get into, and again, if you aren't sure, reach out to me and we'll talk about it. So I've talked about this a little bit already with the physical land, making sure that you bring offerings, making sure that you do all this stuff before entering into it, but I want to talk more specifically about the actual spirits that you will encounter, who you're going to be trafficking with, and how that actually work a cemetery. So again, bring your offerings, coins, alcohol's also good, water, smoke, and food. You want to make sure that you're approaching things properly. You don't want to give alcohol to an alcoholic spirit. You don't want to give too much tobacco or drugs to spirits who really don't need to be riled up. But you also don't want to give them things that are too filling for food, as an example, because they also will be a bit more slow to work and they'll expect that more. It's a learning process. It's a good idea to form a strong relationship with the actual ecology of the graveyard or cemetery. The gatekeeper, you want to bring him cigarettes, bring him shots every so often. He's the one who's going to let you in and out and make sure that things stay in when you go in and stay in when you go out. So the gatekeeper is a very important spirit to engage with. I highly recommend forging a strong relationship and even pacting with the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper will be different depending on your cultural context. You can even create a gatekeeper in some cases. I have found that most of the time the gatekeeper manifests as a skeletal figure carrying particular weapons or items to protect it. Some people encounter gatekeepers who are more hound-like. Others see them as more Grim Reaper-esque. It really depends on your cultural context and who's coming forward. But each cemetery will have an individual gatekeeper or gatekeepers, and it's good to just forge that relationship. Gatekeeper spirits I don't really engage with much outside of the function of let me in, let me out, keep things in, don't let stuff follow me home. If you need to shut off some dead, you give the gatekeeper that authority to keep them back in there. He could probably be invoking some binding stuff too. The Grave Lord or Cemetery Lord is also another spirit who you can petition and you can engage with. That is the overall keeper of the cemetery, the one who's in charge of all these spirits, the one who is sort of the overarching genus loci, I guess, of these spirits. Again, different ones for different cemeteries. They manifest very differently. They tend to be very skeletal for me. That just tends to be my cultural frameworking. I find that the Cemetery Lord can have very particular tastes and can also manifest his presence in different ways. I say he, it can be any gender. How you'll engage with and meet this spirit is going to kind of vary based on context and also what you're trying to do in the cemetery. I recommend making allies with the dead, and the Cemetery Lord will tend to show himself the more you do that, or you can have them take you to him, or you can ask the gatekeeper to bring him forward so you can perpetuate him properly. It's going to be different each time. Some Grave Lords are very, very calm, very cool spirits. Others are going to be a lot more hot. But you want to bring some general offerings: bread, white candle, some water's always going to be fine. They tend to like cigars, I find, but again, your mileage may vary on that. Next, you should ask, who are your important spirits that belong in the cemetery? Who are your crossroads deities? Who are your death spirits? Who are your underworld patrons? Who are your guys that want to be in the cemetery? Always perpetuate them, especially if you're trying to do work with them there. I usually leave like a candle for them, or leave a little bit of water, say some sort of prayer and offering. If you're doing operations, it'll be much more specific, and you'll usually be leaving larger things for them. If you're doing work and you want it to go down to the underworld, you can bury it in a cemetery and call upon your patrons there. Trees and herbs and bushes and all kinds of other things can be important patrons of the cemetery as well. The oldest tree in the cemetery is usually a very powerful witching tree. Usually has strong connotations with the devil, all this stuff. So you can start to engage with those, learn their patronages. Things that are in the cemetery are always going to be of death. Keep that in mind. Whenever you're working with a plant from a cemetery, you're going to have to deal with it being a death plant. And so it may not work the same way as it would outside the cemetery. Like a rose from the cemetery is going to be different than a rose from a church. It's going to be different than a rose from the forest or from your garden. Important dead people will also present themselves, and they're not always going to be the famous dead people. I have honestly, when I lived in Savannah, there's a lot of famous dead people buried all around. They are not always the most important people in the cemetery. That role can change quite a bit, and it will really just be a matter of who presents themselves, who do the other spirits vouch for, who is being directed towards you, and sometimes the important spirit for you is different than the important spirit for me. Okay, I've been mentioning this quite a bit. Spell work can be left here. Dirts, water, herbs can also be gathered there. Dirts, graveyard dirt, cemetery crossroads dirt, specific dead people dirt, dirt from the base of a witching tree, your herbs, cemetery water, cemetery lake water. All kinds of things can be left here and gathered here. All of them have to be paid for properly though. So if you are purchasing dirt, usually like some coins, water, candle, that's usually going to get you good. Coinage is usually what I use. I just like throw a dime and say this is for this, thank you. Some people will want to do more. You can smoke a cigar for the spirit, you can give them alcohol, it really just depends. And when you are gathering this materia, you should also be careful how you treat it. Graveyard dirt, especially like more violent dead dirt, you don't want just laying around. Keep it in a secure place, keep it locked up, keep it labeled. Please label where you get everything. The powder that kills you and the powder that makes you rich are going to look the same eventually, so always label that. Different times of day will also affect the sort of culture of the land, as it were. Day will bring out some spirits and night will bring out others. It kind of changes based on the time of day and also who's going to be more active versus less active. Contrary to popular belief, some dead are much more active during the day, while others are much more active at night, and the actual spirits might change around their personalities, the way that they engage with you, how they want to be perpetuated. The witching tree might be asleep during the day and might be a very vital and helpful fertile tree, while at night she's an evil, vampiric creature who is wonderful for hexing with. It will depend, and you will have to learn that over time. And ultimately, it is a culture. You are asking to enter a culture of the dead when you enter any cemetery. So learn the culture, Learn what they like, learn what they don't like, learn what it's like when this happens, learn what it's like when that happens, learn your special days, all of that. So next is the actual land of the dead itself, the underworld. Again, make sure that you are protected. You should really have things like phylacteries. The Hecatan has a really good phylactery for this. If you don't have a specific talisman for entering the underworld, you should have good allies. Familiars, deities, daimons, all these things that will help you get down there and keep you safe down there. It is not something that you should do immediately, and it's not something that everyone's going to want to do, but it will open up a lot more opportunities for spell work, pact making, spirit travel, engaging with more specific entities. But really make sure that it's a place you want to go and that you have the proper guides. Your death deities, your crossroads deities are going to be the best for this. You can also have a hero like Orpheus lead you down there, but it can also be different herbs. Now, obviously, you have things like Datura and other such things, but there are other herbs that will help you. There's various herbs tied to the underworld, to necromancy, and while they do tend to be more poisonous, there are also some that aren't. You can make a pouch with things like mullein, a little bit of mugwort, and a walnut. And you can turn that into a pretty strong phylactery, specifically tied in with the devil, that will allow you to go down to the underworld, that will allow you to engage with those spirits there. They ensure that you're safe, and they ensure that you have ease in your travels down there. You can even use traveling charms, like the magical garters. You can use some of the travel pentacles from the Key of Solomon to keep you safe in your underworld journeying. Generally, it's best to work on building up the senses of the mind and using specific mythic outlining. You can use like the Seven Veils of Ishtar for getting down into that underworld. You can use the myth of Orpheus as a good framework. You can use all kinds of different framing, but you should have something that allows you to understand the navigation. Again, if you don't know Mictlan, don't go to Mictlan. If you know Hades, go to Hades. I'm going to do a pretty specific episode eventually on vision questing, as it were, so stay tuned for that. I'll get into much more specifics there. But you also don't want to spend too much time in this underworld. Again, it's very heavy on miasmic, so when you get out, cleanse immediately, and don't stay there for too long. I honestly would not recommend at least starting out more than an hour. It's good to just kind of build up your experience and to work through there instead of go there and spend all your day there. Pacts. We've talked about this already in our Grimoire episode, but pacts are very, very helpful. They help with the flow of necromancy, as well as give you authority to actually call upon the dead and spirits of death, the underworld, all those guys. Pacts with guardians of the dead, pacts with magicians, witches, necromancers, spiritists. All these will grant you further power and mastery over the arts. I highly recommend, if you're doing witchcraft, find a necromantic witch. Historically, make a pact with her, learn the way that she did stuff, and work through her patrons as well. Lots of spirit patrons can patron necromancy, and they can be called upon to aid in it. And I honestly recommend doing this first if you're going to do any sort of necromancy. And this can be an ancestor. There are ancestors who patron talking to more dead people. Some will patron it in different ways. The magical dead, the witchy dead, are going to be a lot more, witchcraft about it, while the more saintly dead, the more elevated holy dead, are going to be much more spiritist about it generally. You'll find what works best. There's also pacts with the dead themselves, which can be negotiated in various ways. Again, see my Grimoire podcast for more on pacts like that. But, you go to a dead person, let's say a lawyer, and you're like, okay, I need you to help me win my court case. I need you to help me do well in court, have them believe me, all of that. In return, you get this, this, and this. Deal? Deal. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. So you can do that. Or you can go to another spirit for much more long-term stuff. Let's say that there is a witch buried in your town and you want to talk with her. You go find her, you give her offerings, you're like, you're going to help me, we are going to work together. Every full moon, I will give you this, I will give you these tools, and in turn, you're going to help me deepen my pacts, empower my magic to further witchcraft in this world. And like I said, the dead can influence things on Earth much faster and with much more ease than other spirits, so just having a bunch on your side is very helpful. Getting pacts with the dead who are also very, very much tied into your spirits is good as well. If you have sea spirits, it's good to have mariners who died, Good to have ship workers, beachcombers, people who are tied to the ocean in some way to have on your side. You can bury things in their grave to enhance them and make them more conscious towards your particular work. You can also pact with the cemetery itself and make it another ally. Again, this is like your cemetery lord, your grave lord, but also all the other spirits within it. Making a pact with the cemetery spirits overall will help you do much more effective work and can also speed up the dead in that specific area, allowing you to also access a lot of other spirits that you might not know about because you have that authority of the highest spirit of the cemetery. So the last little bit I want to talk about is doing necromantic spell work. Doing spells is, kind of important to magic. Operations, secrets, whatever you want to call them. All kinds of spell work can be done with the dead. Literally any spell that you can think of can be done with the dead. Healing, protection, money spells, cursing, love spells, favor, healing of more emotional things, court case, all of that can be done. The work can be done in a cemetery and left in it. Different parts of the ecosystem will be better attuned to that. So like burying it in a grave versus leaving it at the crossroads versus leaving it at the gates, leaving it at the back, leaving it at the tree line. It can be done outside of the cemetery and brought back into it. I like to do this a lot. I'll do an operation with a kate and then take it to the cemetery crossroads. You can also start work in the cemetery and bring it somewhere else, especially if you're trying to like bring the dead to a specific place or person. And we're going to start getting into a bunch of examples for that. So we're going to start with probably the easiest thing to do with the dead, which is curse work. Cursing is the first thing people think about when they think of necromancy in the cemetery. But I'll give a very simple example one. You're going to want to go into the cemetery and find the grave of someone who died young and violently, a soldier or a particularly violent person. You want to kind of gauge what you want. A person who died young and violent will be helpful just as a general restless dead. A soldier will follow commands and will tend to carry things out very directly to the letter. A violent person may have more violent and volatile results. So like a murderer, if you're trying to kill someone, go to a murderer. If you're not trying to kill someone, don't go to a murderer. Pay for the dirt and fill up a bottle and add some of the personal concerns of the target, a petition paper, and tools for the spirits to use, such as herbs that correspond to the actual operation, like poisonous herbs, peppers, poppy seed, chili flakes. It depends on what you're trying to do. You can also add different charms to it. People like to use these little silver milagros for representing items like a little silver sword, a shield, things like that. You can give them other charms that you've made yourself. You can create little pinnacles for them. Put that stuff into the dirt and seal it shut with a black candle anointed with oils and herbs to aid in the manifestation of the spirits, to empower it. Mullen's really good for this, mugwort's really good for this, and myrrh is also really good for this. You take the bottle to the target's location or where they'll likely pass, their place of work, things like that, and you'll bury it there. Keep it there as long as it's necessary and feed the spirit at their cemetery once the work is completed. Very easy thing to do. I've done similar things to this with a packet. You can take the dirt, put in the herbs, and put on a photograph of the person, write your petitions, and seal that up with various conjurations. It works really well. It's very effective. I recommend this in more of a, you're not making a pact with the spirit, but you're conjuring the spirit through another one to send them out. I usually do stuff like this through Hecate. An example of a love spell you can do is to find the grave of two lovers, especially if these two are like merged into one grave, they die on the same day, all of that stuff. And bring a poppet of you and the person you desire wrapped up in white ribbon, or red ribbon, or pink ribbon. I'll leave that up to you. White's really good for marriage. Red's very good for like deep passion. Pink is more for like flirty romances, for starting things out. Red is to get it like really going. White's if you want to marry someone. If you're with someone already and want them to marry you, use white. You want to lay it to rest in the grave of the person who is your gender. If there is someone who is not your gender, you can pick whichever one you are closest to in age, I guess. Whoever you feel the most resonance towards. And you're going to put roses all over their grave. Burn a white candle on the grave for 9 days and petition the spirits to make your love for this person the same as their love. There's other things you can add to this as well. Honey's really good. You can put the poppets in a coffin. You can put the poppets in another container. You can add other herbs like Damiana. Add whatever you need. This is a very simple, very clean operation. And lastly, I'll give an example of a healing spell. Find a great tree in the cemetery and offer to it milk mixed with honey. Take a black cloth and fill it with rosemary, rue, clove, frankincense, and any other healing and purifying herbs. Go for things that you work with regularly. You're going to wrap it up and bid the spirit of the tree to aid you in healing. Call upon any of your own healing spirits and pass the bag around you, your head all the way down to your feet. Get everything in it, and as you're doing this, visualize the negativity, the sickness, whatever, going into that black bag and being absorbed by it. You're going to bury it at the base of the tree, and you're going to ask the tree spirit to take the illness that's now in the bag and let it die with everyone else who's already here. Let it be passed down into the underworld, let it be taken away, and let you be cured and healed of this ailment. This type of stuff works really well. I am very big into burying an illness. Having herbal allies always is very helpful. I recommend this if you don't have a tree at a cemetery, do a tree at a crossroads. Very, very good stuff. So, in conclusion, lots of stuff out there with the dead. This is really just an introduction to some protocols and operations you can do. I really hope this is helpful. I really hope you can start developing more relationships with these spirits in your life, or I guess in your death in some cases. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you were able to find something new to try out. And if you have more specific questions, please reach out to me. Again, I'm at AidenTheVavitch on Instagram, AidenTheVavitch1@gmail.com, and AidenTheVavitch.com. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, if you want to book a reading with me, if you want to book spell work. And lastly, our graveyard gnashing for this week, that is our little music segment, is Necromancer by Vandergraaf Generator and Graveyard Song by Greenlung. Necromancer is really fun. I love it. It's very hard to track down a good version of it on Spotify. I recommend looking this up on YouTube. And Graveyard Sun is just a wonderful vampiric piece by Greenlung. You'll see so much Greenlung on my playlist. Feel free to also check out my Sky Snake Sorcery music playlist. But thank you all for listening. I will see you all very soon. So mote it be.